Welcome to Dirshu Daf HaYomi Bahalacha. Today we are learning Hilchos Tzitzis, which is Siman Ches. We are in the middle of Sif Yud Beis, starting with the words V'hu Adin. We're also going to be seeing some of Sif Yud Gimel up into the words Ve'im Mispalel. The three questions that we're going to be focusing on, the topics: can a bracha on a Talit Katan exempt a Talit Gadol? Second topic is a change in location, a hefsek for birchas mitzvos. And finally, does saying Hashem's name in vain violate a Torah prohibition? That one we're going to do first. So let's continue where we left off, which is the middle of Sif Yud Beis. V'hu adin, imo haya b'daitu medchil al kulam. Let's say you have numerous four-cornered garments, but you don't have intention to just make a bracha on one of them and pater the rest. Then havi kamavzik beinehem, that's considered to be a hefsek, an interruption. Says the Ramah, v'chein im poshat harishon. If you remove the first one, kadem shalav hasheni, before you put the second one on, sarach lachzol avarich. In that situation, you would have to say another bracha as well. So the Mishnah Berurah says, havi kamavzik. Even if you have all the garments in front of you when you say the bracha, it doesn't make any difference, because if you did not have das originally for all of them, then you would have to say a bracha on the others. This is a situation where you don't normally wear, let's say, 10 Talit Katan. You only wear one. So if you only wear one, so therefore, typically, minastam, you probably only have das on that one. It's like almost like you changed your mind, because you always wear just one. So even though you have a bunch of them in front of you, it's kenimlach. It's almost like you only had bracha on the first one, and therefore you have to say bracha on the other ones as well. Fine. And then he says as follows. And he says, im berach al talis katan al mitzvahs kimin hagenu. Let's say you made the bracha al mitzvah sitzes on your talis katan. The lokach miyad ha talis gadol, and then you grab the talis gadol immediately. Im hoyadait beferish lifter de al mitzvahs in tzarachak salat barach. If you had in mind when you made the bracha on your tzitzis, on the Talit Katan, that you're immediately afterwards going to put on the Talit Gadol, then you don't need to say a bracha there. Or mistam you'd have to say a second bracha on the Talis. Of course, our minhag is to have the opposite. You make the bracha on the Talit Gadol, and you had in mind on the Talit Katan. So we don't make a bracha on the Talit Katan. So he says, "Mistama in daitu ba'al mitzvahs ki im al talis katan." Usually, when you say al mitzvah sitzes, it's only on the talis katan, and therefore you're not going to have das on the talis gadol unless it's done right away and you have specific intentions. Mikol makom achatchila b'vadai lishu zahir shli yivarech al talis katan im b'dait livosh tekev talis gadol. A person should not make the bracha on al mitzvah sitzes if he's going to immediately afterwards put on the talis gadol anyway. B'shim garam bracha shenut sricha, which we're going to talk about exactly what is the significance of a bracha shenut sricha. Im lovash talis b'lo bedika. Let's say you wear a talis, you didn't check it, and umatzo isubsul. Then you found out that all the tzitzis are ripped, so it's not a kosher beged. Oh, shenivsut tzitz yoisav achachach v'lovish talis acher. Let's say it was kosher, but then it ripped in the middle of the day. So what do? What's the din? When you put another talis, you need to make another bracha on that new pair of tzitzis. Unless again you had intention that just in case I decide to put on this future beged, so it's going to have das on that. If you don't have that idea, beferish, then you would have to say another bracha. Now, we just mentioned this concept that there's an idea of a bracha shenu sricha. That's possible a person could have say a bracha without the right, what you don't need to do. So we ask the question, does saying Hashem's name in vain violate a Torah prohibition? So the Bi'urim Musafim breaks it down into 4 different levels. And he says as follows, quoting the Shalos and Chuvas of the Shevet Levi. He says one level is Hamoitzi Shem Shemayim Levatala Shaloi B'derech Bracha, which is like the absolute worst. You just say Hashem's name, there's no bracha attached to it, so you just totally use Hashem's name in vain. So overall, asay min Torah. In that case, it's undisputed. You violated a positive a positive mitzvah. You violated it from the Torah. Next level is Hamaitzi alidei amiras bracha vatal. You said a bracha. You say the bracha of Brei Priya Gofen, and there's no wine. You just decide to say a bracha, a total bracha, which is batala. So according to the Rambam, he says it's actually an Isser of Loisisa. It's a Torah violation. The Shittas Taisus, it's an Isser de Rabbanan. Okay. He says the pasuk is just a kruz, a smachta be'alma, but it's really din de Rabbanan. The third level is a garim bracha shena sricha. If you cause the bracha to be not necessary, for example, that for your exam, you were able to pater yourself with another bracha, and then there was a hefsek. And therefore, because of that, you require another bracha. So, because you created an interruption, so therefore you have to say another bracha. So, when it comes to whatever mitzvah may be, in which if the hefsek is significant enough that you would be required to say another bracha, so therefore it's also, that's obviously not okay, but everyone holds that to Isser D'Rabbanan. And then the fourth level is Berach al Davar Hatafel B'Makam Sha'ikar Paitro Ein Bo Isser. Let's say, for example, L'chayra, it's talking about a situation, you make a bracha on a carrot, Brei Priya Dama, when the truth is, you had the ikr in front of you, you could have just said hamotzi, or maybe you did say hamotzi, so you no longer have to say the bracha on the vegetable because it was a tuffle to the ikr. So that Ein bo isser. He says that's not even considered to be an isser. So there are different levels exactly how this plays out. So this is how Dirshu writes it. It is forbidden to utter the name of Hashem in vain. Contemporary poskim divide this halacha into three parts. Mentioning Hashem's name in vain, not in the context of a bracha, is forbidden min Torah. The Rishonim disagree about whether saying a bracha levatal is forbidden min Torah midrabanan. Saying a bracha shenu sricha, an unnecessary bracha, is forbidden midrabanan. For example, it is forbidden to recite a bracha on a secondary food if a bracha on the primary food would exempt both foods. So technically you can say, I'll eat a carrot and then I'll eat bread. So don't do it that way. Instead, better to eat the bread and then you won't have to say the bracha on the carrot. So according to that, it says Ein bo isser. So in that situation, he says it's forbidden to recite a bracha in that situation. Okay. Let's move on to Siman Sif Yud Gimel. Lovish Talos Katan. A person wore a Talos Katan, so he puts on his small cotton. He made the bracha of al mitzvah sitzes. Then he goes to shul. Misate Talit Gadol. Sarach avarach alav dahalichem abeso lebeis hachneses chashiva hefsek. So if you go from your house to the shul, that's a hefsek, and therefore you still have to say a bracha on the Talit Gadol when you get to shul. So on this, the Mishnah Berurah says the halicha b'achrayim hiskimu de'etzem halicha lo yichashav hefsek. The fact that you travel from one place to the next, that's not really a hefsek. Yafa pikein kostav l'sarach avarach al Talit Gadol mishum shini makoim. So it's not because that you were traveled, but it's an issue of shini makom. So if there's an element of changing your location from one place to the next, that's the reason why it's necessary to make another bracha. And this is discussed at great length, the dinim of shini makom in Ari Psachim, the last paragraph of Masechtas Psachim. So it says in the Biurim Umusafim the following case. He says, "Inyan halichem sukkah l'sukkah." How about, let's say you eat in a sukkah, you make a leisha b'sukkah, then you go to your next door neighbor's sukkah. Is that considered a hefsek, and therefore you'll have to make another bracha? So it's actually told in the machlokas achronim kan legabi tzitzis. That maybe it's the same din that when it comes to tzitzis, again, if you are going and creating a Shini Makom, whether another bracha is warranted. So he quotes in the name of the Habais Meir, he says there's actually a chiluk between the mitzvah of tzitzis and sukkah. And you have to kind of hear this out. He says, when it comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis, every talus is a mitzvah b'fnei atzmahi. Every talus that you put on is a separate mitzvah. So therefore, maybe you have to say a separate bracha there. Not so when it comes to a sukkah, shishtein mitzvah achasi. It's really just one mitzvah. Lo shana sukkah zum sukkah acheres. There's no real difference between one sukkah and the next. Okay. Think about what the svaras of that chiluk. He says, regarding bedikas chametz, let's say you search chametz in different houses on Erev Pesach, shikivan shebedikas kulam mitzvah achasi. Since doing a bedika, getting rid of your chametz, so you're not over by your rabbi matzeh, that is one concept. In halicha chashuv hefsek. You moving is not a hefsek. The yochel lotzis bebracha achas al kulam. Ulam b'shem b'chaya adam kaiser shchayel kal kachin. That's a machlokas. There are those that say that even though you've moved, it's not considered to be a hefsek. So one of the questions is a change in location a hefsek for berachas and mitzvos? So he says as follows. The poskim disagree about whether halicha havi hefsek, walking is an interruption. This question is relevant in cases where a person made a bracha on a mitzvah and plans to repeat the mitzvah in another location. Does the movement from one place to another constitute a hefsek that would make a new bracha necessary? So some poskim differentiate between situations in which the second mitzvah is merely a continuation of the first mitzvah, which is, like, for example, Sukkah is going to explain, and those in which the second mitzvah is a new mitzvah. For example, one who recited a bracha and sat in the Sukkah would not have to say another bracha if he went to sit in the neighbor's Sukkah. The second Sukkah is a continuation of the mitzvah of sitting in the Sukkah. So a new bracha is not necessary. However, a person who put on a second pair of tzitzis in a new location, the second pair is a new mitzvah that would call for a new bracha. So again, there's possibility of being mechalik. Again, whether it's true by sukkah, there's this distinction. It's a machlokas among the poskim. Okay, so the last element which we discussed already in Mishnah Berurah is, can a bracha on a Talit Katan exempt a Talit Gadol? So we said in Sif Yud Gimel that if you're wearing a Talit Katan, if you're traveling to shul, you have to make another bracha. However, it's possible that if you actually had das and the talis is right in front of you, that maybe you won't have to say a bracha on the talis. So this is how he explains the answer. Can a bracha on a Talit Katan exempt a Talit Gadol? A person who is not planning to wear more than one four-carded garment, which is the Mishnah Berurah said, but later changes his mind, must recite another bracha. This is the case even if the additional clothing was in front of him at the time of the first bracha, as the Mechaber said. Similarly, one who recited al mitzvah tzitzis on a Talit Katan must recite a second bracha on a Talit Gadol. It can be assumed that he did not want to exempt the Talit Gadol since he did not say the proper bracha. Those who follow the Shulchan Aruch's ruling and recite l'satef on a Talit Katan do not have to recite a separate bracha on a Talit Gadol. So that's actually a huge chiddush, that if your minig is not to say on tzitzis, on mitzvah tzitzis, to say l'satef b'tzitzit, so therefore that bracha, which is the same on a Talit Gadol, so therefore by you saying l'satef b'tzitzis on a Talit Katan, you would not have to say a separate bracha on the Talit Gadol. Let's see if we have any questions. So he says as follows. Question 2. If one removed one's talis intending to put it on much later and then put it on right away, does he say another bracha? And the answer is yes. That is considered to be a hefsek. And when a hefsek is created, then it's necessary for a person to say another bracha. Ad kan.